It's hard to put into words exactly what a big deal it was to have a PC in the 90s. Today we're on a pretty even footing in what home computers and consoles can produce graphically. Sure, the PC might be able to produce a more polished product, shadier shading systems, godlier god rays, and uncapped frame rate smoother than real life. But personally, if it can hit 60 FPS and the things on screen look even remotely like what they're supposed to, I'm happy. However, this wasn't always the case. Back in the 90s and early 2000s, PC gaming was leaps and bounds ahead of what consoles could do. My mom had a PC when I was younger, though it was little more than a glorified word processor. The only proper game it had on it was the original Prince of Persia, which a family friend had installed. No, I wanted a real PC. Something with a CD drive and a Sound Blaster card. I'm sure I fed my mom a whole load of reasons why spending all my money on a computer would be somehow good for my education, but really I just wanted it for the games. Those sparkly, slick-ass games that you just couldn't get anywhere else. I saved every penny I had for 2 years, working my way up to £800 when my grandmother randomly gifted me another £1,000. And one day, out of nowhere, I was suddenly able to afford a computer. My first PC had a 166 MHz Pentium processor, 32 megabytes of RAM, 3 gigs of memory, and a read-only CD drive. Along with a HP color printer and a basic monitor, it all came to around £1,800, or €4,100 in today's money, which would have been over $5,000, which is fucking insane when I say it out loud. And the awful bit is that there was considerably better PCs available at the time. The Pentium 2 would have already been out. I bought it from this old couple that ran a computer shop in Dalkey, a little village in the south of Dublin where I used to live. I'd gotten typing lessons from the wife and figured I should probably buy my computer from her because if there was anything wrong with it, then... Do you see where this is going? The machine was supposed to be internet ready. You pop in your Aircom disk and boom! World Wide Web at your fingertips. But that, of course, is not how it went. You see, we didn't do the internet thing right away, as we were told you had to pay a monthly subscription for the privilege of using it, which ran an extra £100 or so a year. I don't know if this was supposed to include unlimited use or what, but that old couple just didn't explain things very well, and I didn't know the pertinent questions that I should be asking because, look, give me a break, I was 11. Anyway, a few months passed and we realised we could just connect and pay per minute like a regular phone call, but sure enough, when it came time to try, nothing. We rang up to complain, but those old shitbags did not want to hear anything about it. They told us to try a few things, but none of it worked. It was many more months until my mate's tech-savvy dad came over, rejiggered some things in the old grey box, and within an hour, we were surfing the web. Or was it surfing the net? That was one of those very trendy terms that just did not catch on, quickly replaced by using the internet. Man, the old school net was a trip. No streaming sites, no YouTube. The web back then was little more than a glorified electronic magazine, and I actually do struggle to remember what we even used it for. Pretty much every series, movie, or game had some sort of fan site made for it. Emailing people was novel, but I viewed it more as a grown-up activity, more functional than fun.
You've got mail.
Oh, online chat rooms, they were the shit. The first thing you always typed was ASL, or age, sex, location, and all of a sudden I was talking with some random visions of a hot American girl that was super interested in me because I lived in Ireland, and I can almost guarantee you every single one of those conversations was with some overweight, middle-aged man reeking of cigarettes and sadness. Good times. Being able to access boobs on demand was an amazing privilege for a teenage boy, and when I say boobs on demand, I mean pictures of boobies. And you had to wait for said picture to load. And I don't mean poof and suddenly there it was. That loaded in sections. Most of the actual explicit stuff on the early web was blocked behind paywalls. I had this strange sense of honor when looking at naughty stuff. I would only go into a site if it didn't contain a warning screen that said you had to be over 18 to enter. I was a weird kid. You could buy stuff on eBay, but there was an uneasiness for things on the internet where you had to use your credit card. There was this period of time where the general public was totally convinced everything online was a scam. Webcams were a thing, but it was usually just looking out in some street corner with a refresh rate of 1 frame every 3 seconds, and it reminds me of that one Harry Enfield joke.
You can actually see the people who are speaking to you on the wireless, as if they were in your own home.
Now we go over to Balmoral, where His Majesty the King will address the nation.
Actually, that's not even accurate because any of the webcam feeds I'd happened to come across never had sound. You did occasionally find video clips on a website, but if they were more than like 10 seconds long, they took a freaking eternity to load. This one time I found the music video for Papa Roach's Last Resort in this little windowed 144p resolution, and it took so long to load that I just left the page open for the whole evening so I could watch it again. Oh, side note, remember CD singles? Those things that have probably filled many thousands of landfills? Well, some of them contained a file of the music video on the disc. I had a couple of them by Korn, falling away from me and make me bad, and oh my god, it was so f***ing cool being able to watch these on your computer in what was actually really good quality for the time. Seriously, if we wanted to watch a music video whenever we wanted that wasn't recorded off the TV, this was it. Y'all motherfuckers don't even know how good you've got it these days. There was one thing that made me want a PC over all else, and that was Doom. To say that Doom changed everything is an absolute understatement. Doom was everything, the absolute pinnacle of gaming, Mount f***ing Olympus. It was what all other games wanted to be. Yeah, you could eventually play Doom on consoles, I had it on the SNES, but it just wasn't the same. The graphics sucked, the frame rate existed. Jesus, you couldn't even save your game, which caused me much distress as a child. My first purchase was the triple pack of Doom, Doom 2, and the Master levels. I had basically spent the equivalent of a used car for this experience, but man, there was nothing like playing Doom in its original purest form. Silky smooth gameplay filled with gore and glee, and Doom 2 was even better. I played for many a happy hour as that Space Marine, murdering the fuck out of the demon hordes of hell. Yeah, poor Duke has become somewhat of a punching bag in his later years, but when this first came out, holy shit, it was amazing. Even though it's got 3D proudly displayed as part of its name, it wasn't 3D in the sense that we understand it today. Yes, it had a sort of 3D environment, but all the enemies were 2D sprites just like in Doom. But there was so much more here. Vibrant colors, jetpacks, jumping, pipe bombs, kicking things in the face. There was this devil-may-care attitude to Duke. And look, I'm not saying that Doom was ever supposed to be considered a serious game, but there was a stark contrast of the lone, silent protagonist versus this.
It's time to kick ass and chew bubble gum. And I'm all out of gum.
Oh, and there was boobies. It was my first time ever seeing a pair of squishy love cushions in a video game, and at the time it was considered highly controversial. When it was ported to the N64, even though it was an 18s, and not just any 18s, but a BBFC 18s, the strip club in level 2 where you first encounter said lovely lady lumps was changed into a loading bay. It's kind of wild to think that these days you can buy the original uncensored game on Nintendo Switch, and it's not even considered 18s content anymore. Back before I had my own PC, I would sometimes visit this internet cafe in Temple Bar where you'd pay £4 an hour to either peruse the internet or play games. Seeing as it was always my mom paying, she would insist that I browse the internet because, I don't know, as an emerging technology, I guess she thought it was important I become familiar with it. I would usually squeeze in about 10 minutes of Doom at the end because, I mean, come on, I'm only human. Anyway, one of the games I frequently saw other patrons play was a real-time strategy game called Warcraft 2. I wasn't really familiar with RTS games because it's one of those things you absolutely must play on a PC. It just does not work well without a mouse. It's the only Tolkien-esque orcs and elves kind of world that has ever drawn me in, and the only RTS that I've ever given two shit about. The biggest problem with any real-time strategy game for me is that they're just way too complicated. You can sit someone down and teach them how to play Warcraft 2 in literally 5 minutes. Build a town hall, train some peasants, mine some gold, chop some wood, build a barracks, train some fighters. Obliterate your enemy. It is that easy to pick up, and oh man is it addictive. The bright, cheery graphics paired with bloody deaths was the perfect combo for my 11-year-old brain, and I was endlessly fascinated watching the corpses of fallen soldiers rotting to nothing, almost like a gory cartoon lava lamp. I played through the Human campaign again recently, and even 27 years later, Warcraft 2 freaking rules. This is a game I'd never heard of. I walked into some game shop, saw this cover, and was like, yeah, I gotta own this. A new game made by 3D Realms, the creators of Duke Nukem, it followed a similar tongue-in-cheek, ultra-violent romp with protagonist Lo Wang. It was many years later before I found out that this name was supposed to be a joke, because Wang is just not a word we use this side of the world.
Thank goodness he's drawn attention away from my shirt.
The game never quite did it for me the way Duke Nukem did. The levels always felt more cramped and everything looked way more pixelated. They did ramp the gore way up though. Your starting weapon was able to slice a dude in half, which greatly pleased my adolescent brain. All in all, it was an enjoyable if somewhat confusing game at times. I also like the fact that when you boot up Duke Nukem it reads, "Warning, adult content," but in Shadow Warrior it just says, "Warning, mature content." You know why? No titties. I got this one a year or two later. I can't remember exactly when I heard about Half-Life, but in all honesty, it was everywhere. Talked about in hushed tones like some sort of second coming of Christ. And I fully believe it lived up to its reputation. Where Duke Nukem ramped up the camp factor, Half-Life protagonist Gordon Freeman went in the opposite direction. PhD welding, MIT graduating, 27-year-old everyman. Okay, maybe not an everyman, but you know what I mean. Never before had I witnessed such rich storytelling woven into a game world. So quiet and somber beginning, observing your surroundings on your daily commute to work, the mundane yet somehow captivating interactions with your co-workers, and the inevitable on-site accident when you just try to cram too much science into your sciencey thing. I did not graduate from MIT. From a gameplay perspective, Half-Life is very enjoyable, creepy and foreboding as you cleave and shoot your way through an onslaught of monsters, not a million miles from what you'd see in Doom or Duke 3D. But then the entire thing is flipped on its head when the military arrives, and you're thinking, thank God we're saved. But no, they're here to kill you. Here to cover up any evidence of your whoopsie science thing. And these guys are like wicked smart. I remember many a time hiding in an alcove, having gunned down a couple of adversaries, waiting for the next wave to wander into the aim of my 357 Magnum. 30 seconds would pass and then a grenade was hurled into my little hidey hole, forcing me to run out into the gunfire of those bastard soldiers. Even though 1998 was still the early days of 3D graphics, Valve didn't try to do too much with Half-Life's engine. It is a game free from visual mess or unnecessary clutter, and even 20-something years later, it still looks gorgeous. I go back and replay it every few years, and it is a joy every single time. You play as Manny Calavera, a travel agent who ferries the recently deceased through the land of the dead. Based around Mexican and Aztec tradition, Grim Fandango is dripping with style, complete with a beautiful Art Deco aesthetic. The game is excellent in pretty much every way a game can be excellent. Beautiful presentation, impeccable soundtrack, voice acting and dialogue that could go toe-to-toe with any big-budget Hollywood production. Tony Plana, who voices Manny, gives a phenomenal performance. How this dude didn't become a superstar is beyond me.
You'll get plenty of rest this way, Mr. Martinez, and you'll be safely padded by the foam created when these two chemicals mix, like this.
On second thought, I want to upgrade my package.
Sorry, Bruno, but you didn't qualify for anything better. But here, have this complimentary mug.
The only other part he played that I'd ever heard of was the dad from Ugly Betty. Looking through the wiki of the other stuff he was in... Wait, there was a Lethal Weapon series? When the f*** did that happen? Huh. When everything was said and done, this masterpiece was considered a commercial failure. It sold 500,000 copies on a $3 million budget, which, isn't great when a few years earlier Full Throttle sold 1 million copies and only cost half the amount to make. What really baffles me, though, is how they sold this. Traditionally, adventure games of this sort were in a point-and-click style, and much like real-time strategy games, they belonged on the PC because trying to move a cursor around the screen without a mouse is just cumbersome and annoying as shit. Hey! I tried with Broken Sword 2 on PlayStation, it wasn't great. However, Grim Fandango was the first LucasArts adventure to be in 3D, and because of this, you moved your character around just like in any other third-person game. In my heart of hearts, I believe they could have ported this to the PS1. Sure, it might have been stripped back visually, it may have needed to have been on 4 discs, but at the end of the day, Grim Fandango's characters are basic 3D shapes set against pre-rendered backgrounds. It's not what you'd call a graphically intensive game. Growing up, there was only one other guy I knew who owned it, and having it released only on PC seemed like such a dumb decision. It made its potential audience a fraction of what it could have been. While I am glad it did eventually make it to consoles, even though it took until 2015 to do so, I just don't think the people who played it for the first time all those years later would get the same joy as those of us who got to play it when it was new. So, was my first PC worth the stupid amount I paid for it? You goddamn right it was. It gave me an opportunity to experience a unique set of games and the bizarre landscape of the early internet that otherwise would have been impossible. At the end of my first PC's life, I had come to despise it because, at this stage it ran like wet arse on a hot day. I know I shouldn't have been that hard on an 8-year-old machine. I don't know if I thought that PCs ran at peak performance forever or what. It was a reliable old workhorse that really owed me nothing. And as a final hurrah, For some reason, I felt it necessary to set it on fire and throw it off the roof of my house. Good times.